Invasion in Ukraine has brought global community to condemn the war against Ukraine. At this moment, we will see from Russia's perspective what actually happened in war between Russia and Ukraine. Join us live Russian Ambassador to Indonesia, Her Excellency, Madam Ambassador Lyudmila Georgievna Voro-Byova. Madam Ambassador, thank you for your time and willingness for this interview today. First of all, I want to ask you about, can you tell how the development of Russian military aggression against Ukraine to date?
Well, thank you. A very good day to everyone, and thank you very much for willing to hear the perspective from Russian view. First of all, we're not conducting a war against Ukraine or Ukrainian people. It's a special military operation. And our goal is not to occupy or invade Ukraine, but to protect the people of Lugansk and Donetsk who have been suffering for 8 years the atrocities performed by Ukrainian army and by the criminal regime in Kiev that came to power as a result of illegal coup d'etat in 2014, which was supported by the Western powers and inflicted immeasurable sufferings to the people of Donbass and Lugansk and Donetsk and to Ukrainian people, actually. So our president has stated very clearly that the targets of this operation are not to make people of Ukraine suffer, but to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine and to protect the people of Lugansk and Donetsk. And there's a lot of fake information now that the Russian armed forces are targeting civilian infrastructure. That is absolutely lies. It has been stated many times by Ministry of Defense that we're not targeting civilians. We're not targeting hospitals, homes, schools, bridges. We're targeting just the military installation of the armed forces of Ukraine. And we're being very careful, and we are sparing the civilian population and also actually the military people from Ukraine. We don't want to inflict any suffering or cause any deaths among the civilians in Ukraine. Ukrainians are our brothers and sisters. We don't want to make them suffer. So these are lies. We are targeting only the military infrastructure, and indeed we leave humanitarian passages for anyone who wants to leave the cities of Ukraine. And also it was stated if the Ukrainian military wants to surrender, they are free to do so, and they will not be persecuted. They can just go home to their families.
Yeah, so Madam, can you tell me more specific reason and a background of Russian military action in Ukraine? Like you said before, there's no military aggression to Ukraine at the moment, but you have to be ready, accept any consequences like criticism, like sanction from other countries like NATO, for example.
Well, you know, it's not easy to answer just in 2 words. You know, for 8 years since 2014, we were urging Kiev to fulfill the Minsk agreement that actually presented a very clear roadmap how to solve the conflict in Donbass, which at that time we considered as a civil war inside Ukraine. And actually we were one of the initiators of the Minsk agreement. We urged the leadership of Lugansk and Donetsk to sit together with the representatives from Kiev and find ways to solve this conflict in a peaceful way. For 8 years, we've been doing so. We've been urging Kiev, we were urging our Western partners to push Kiev to fulfill the agreements and stop performing atrocities in Lugansk and Donetsk and killing people in Lugansk and Donetsk. For 8 years, every day there were people who were dying in Donetsk and Lugansk, and the mainstream Western media have never reported on that. And that is the last resort, actually. We don't want war. We want to stop the war that was going on for 8 years in Lugansk and Donetsk region. And in these 8 years after the regime came in Kiev, the criminal regime in Kiev came to power, we tried to stop the West from turning Ukraine into an anti-Russian instrument in their hands. So we are ready for dialogue. We are ready to find solutions, and we are engaging talks with Kiev. Our aim to stop military action as soon as possible, but only when the targets will be fulfilled, be it military or diplomatic way. And I would say that the hysteria that the West is showing right now is just an example how there are double standards prevailing in the policies of our Western countries. Why there was no hysteria when they are bombing heavily Yugoslavia in 1999? Where was the hysteria when NATO was bombing Libya, Iraq, when the Americans were in Afghanistan? Where were the sanctions? Where were this collective hysteria from the West?
Mm-hmm. Madam Ambassador, the Ukrainians say they will fight against Russian army at all costs, that including their arms the civilians. Has the Russian considered about war against the civilian?
Who is saying that? The government of Kiev, which is not very much supported by their own population. You know that they distributed arms among civilians, among criminals who were released from prisons. You know, I'm sure that many Ukrainians, they know what is really happening, and they are sick and tired with the Nazi groups terrorizing the population in Lugansk and Donetsk and in Ukraine itself, terrorizing Russian speaking. You know that in Ukraine you could have been beaten or thrown away from your office only for speaking Russian. This is a very Russophobic policies that were conducted by Kiev with the support of their and even instigation by their Western partners. The first thing that the government in Kiev in 2014 tried to do was to ban people from speaking Russian language. Can you imagine Ireland banning English language, or Belgium banning French language, or even Indonesia banning Javanese language? It's unthinkable. And the West was turning a blind eye to all this violation of human rights. You know that President Zelen-Sky has called Russians and living in Lugansk and Donetsk as a species, as animals, actually. Doesn't that remind you of the Nazi ideology when they were people and they were subhumans?
Mm-hmm. Madam, we're talking about the negotiation. Is there any possibility for both countries to minimize the escalation of the armed forces, and especially about the invasion of the troops? And during the talks or negotiation, Madam Ambassador, do you have any updating about the second commitment dialogue had been before already commemorate to minimize the escalation?
We agreed to have talks with the Ukrainian side. We had one round of talks already in Belarus. I don't know the details, they haven't been disclosed, but according to what the head of our delegation said, the two sides have reached some or identified some points of compromise, and they agreed to have a second round of talks. I believe it would happen today, and also according to what the head of Russian delegation, Medinsky, said, they will be discussing a ceasefire. That will be one of the topics of the discussion.
Okay, we will continue our dialogue after this short break. We're going to come back after the commercial break, madam. Welcome back to CNN Indonesia News Hour with me and Madam Ambassador Lyudmila Georgievna Voro-Byova. Our following question, Madam, we're going to having a question about regarding the second attempt of talk within both countries. Will Russia give the truce during the talk or negotiation?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah. Regarding the current condition, is there any possibility for the second attempt of talk within both countries? Will Russia give a truce during the talk or negotiation?
Well, as I told you right now, according to the statement by the head of our delegation, one of the topics that is going to be discussed during the second round of talks is the possibility of a ceasefire.
We're talking about other community, especially another country, give any comment about this. If we know that the global community has condemned the Russian attack, especially they're asking Russia to stop the war. What we want to know is how do Russia respond with this situation?
Well, as I told you, we are not trying to launch a war. Actually, we're trying to stop one from happening in Donetsk and Lugansk, and also we are trying to prevent bigger military conflicts being launched in Europe. Actually, when we are discussing this issue, we should be mindful of a broader context just that triggered the current crisis in Ukraine. Back in 2008, at Russian NATO summit in Bucharest, President Putin warned that NATO should think twice or even thrice before making a record that Ukraine and Georgia would be in NATO. But they presented as a huge compromise that France and Germany could achieve, replacing the EU's proposal to extend the membership action plan to Ukraine and Georgia right away. So for us, the red line was that Ukraine should become a member of NATO, because placement of NATO military infrastructure on Ukrainian soil, and you know Ukraine has a large border with Russia, would make us retaliate, which would inevitably put Russia and NATO on the verge of conflict. We cannot allow that to happen.
Yes.
This is why you know that in December 2021, we reached out to the US and NATO offering to make agreements that should give Russia some security guarantees. But we extended our hand. We were ready for dialogue, but the US and NATO rejected us.
Madam, if economic sanctions were imposed on Russia, the Russian people and the world will also be affected. What will Russia respond to this financial predicament?
Well, they are already imposed. And of course, this is an absolutely unfair game. The sanctions are illegal. And of course, they will affect Russia's economy and I'm sure the global situation. But actually, we've been under sanctions since 2014. Do you remember that then President Obama said that it will bring Russian economy to shreds. It never happened, actually. We have a big potential, we have stability, and though, of course, I'm not saying that it will not affect us, it will, but I'm sure that at the end, we will adapt and we will survive, and our country will still develop. Because the West, I mean the U.S. and its allies are not the whole world. And you cannot isolate Russia, a country like Russia, only because we have our own interests and we need our security to be guaranteed. Not many countries, I would say majority of countries are not joining the sanctions against Russia. So, of course, it's not a good thing that is happening. It's obvious. And also what is really unthinkable that it's not only economic sanctions, but all these restrictions, they are aimed at cultural relations, at our sports people, at human relations and contact. What's this? The West usually boasts that these illegitimate unilateral sanctions, they are aimed at the government and they don't want to hurt people, but now they are trying to hurt people.
We're talking about our relationship. The economic relations between Russia and Indonesia have been ongoing for a long time. Will this military action affect trade cooperation between Russia and, of course, Indonesia?
Well, I really hope that why would our relation with a third country affect our good relations with Indonesia that we see as our good friend and partner? Even despite COVID, our trade has been growing 40%, I believe, last year. And hopefully we can still go on with our very good cooperation.
So how do you view this war so far and where will this lead to?
Well, from our point of view, it's not a war, it's a military operation, and hopefully it will, at the long run, it will bring more peace and stability in Europe. This is the least peril. We are preventing some bigger tragedy from happening.
Madam Ambassador, how do you respond to the assumption that there are illegally propaganda effort by the Russian side, which stand to corner Ukraine to look like the guilty party for provoking the Russian military action?
It's really laughable things to say when there is an information war or even information terror launched against Russia, and not even now. For several years, anything bad happening in the world, the Western propaganda was claiming it was Russia behind it. So it's really so unfair. And as I told you, there's so many fakes about our military operation, and especially what is really horrible when the videos and photos showing, in fact, what the Ukrainian army was doing in Donetsk, Lugansk, are being presented as what the Russian armed forces are doing in Ukraine. These are lies and fakes being showered into the information space, the global information space by the Western propaganda.
Madam, how do Russia respond with Indonesia's statement to stop the war and to not giving any escalation in the war of invasion to Ukraine?
Well, I wouldn't agree more that war is a tragedy, is a terrible thing, and our country knows what war is. You know that we lost 27 million people during World War II, and it's our least intention to launch war. We don't start wars. We actually end them if you look at the history. So we really hope that that this action will prevent the tragedy from a bigger tragedy from happening.
Last question about the Ukrainian invasion and consider as a threatening the global security, also the time of using nuclear arms. How does the Russian talk about this?
You know, we, as I said, we are against the war, and if it only was to Russia, war would never happen. It's not especially a nuclear war. And the nuclear weapons that we have are an instrument of defense and not of attack. There were several very aggressive statements from Western leaders about the possibilities of World War III happening. If it depends on Russia, World War III will never happen.
Thank you, Madam, for your time and opportunity today. Madam Ambassador, we hope that this conflict can be resolved by any peaceful means, prioritizing diplomacy in the name of humanity.
Thank you.